Have you ever made up an excuse for something, but then started to really believe in that excuse, to the point where you convince yourself that it was real? When I was in 3rd grade, me and my friend were on the field during lunchtime, just sitting there and having this imaginary verbal Pokemon battle. We got so into it that we completely missed the bell for our class. The only thing that snapped us out of it was when we noticed significantly bigger kids running around on the field. We looked at each other in shock, knowing what that meant. We were totally late to class. We both got up at the same time and just started sprinting. Once we made it to the room, we opened the door to find our classmates making the Christmas cards we previously left off on before lunch, and our teacher had 3 of them. He actually helped us keep pace with the class even though we were late. After that sprint, me and my friend were totally out of breath, and I said out loud that I felt like throwing up. This was a total lie to cover up the fact that I just felt terrible for being late and wanted the teacher to feel sympathy to mitigate the consequences of being late. Luckily, we had such a cool teacher that he wasn't mad at all and just told me to catch my breath. The part I want to highlight is that I believed in what I said so much that my stomach actually started to feel a little odd, like I actually wanted to throw up. It's pretty crazy how powerful your mind is when it comes to inducing feelings from fantasy. The concept is actually kind of similar to the movie Inception, where they try to plant an idea into someone's mind, except this is self-induced. Your mind can either be your most powerful weapon or your worst enemy. Obviously, you don't want it to be the latter, so how can you make sure that your mind is always fighting for you and not against you? My answer is that you perform a sort of self-inception, where you convince yourself that this is the reason you feel a certain way, or you convince yourself that you feel a certain way to make something make sense. This can be a little tricky to understand, so let me give you a very odd example. There was a time I was driving back from San Francisco to LA, and I started to feel tired and sleepy. There was still about 2 hours of driving left, so drowsiness was a really bad sign for me. Before I tell you what I did to wake myself up, I need you to know that when I drive, I don't mind when people cut me off, or drive slowly in front of me, or tailgate me, or pretty much anything. I just drive peacefully. But this time, I convinced myself that I was angry because of how slow people were driving. I got so pissed off that I actually started to feel awake and drove that 2 hours no problem. How exactly did I convince myself to feel something I normally don't feel? I used something that I call subjective reasoning. For some people, it just makes sense to be angry about how people drive so slowly. I mean, it's natural, right? If you ask me, not exactly. You can choose how your mind works and what your logic is. Because when dealing with something subjective, you can basically reason your way to any conclusion, hence the name subjective reasoning. Your logic can be, we're all human beings living, trying to get to our destination, so it makes no sense to get mad at a slow driver. Or your reasoning can be, I hate slow drivers because they clog up the highways, making it much longer to reach my destination. Both ways of reasoning technically make sense, but one leads to a better outcome than the other in different situations. Usually, the more peaceful and positive thoughts lead to the better outcome. But ironically, in my case, getting angry kept me awake and safe. The truth is, we can use subjective reasoning to convince ourselves to believe and feel close to anything, regardless of whether or not it's true. And because we view it as a sort of reasoning, it makes sense for us to believe it, or in the case that you're making an excuse, it can convince you to believe it. The way that we turn this into a weapon that fights for you is to realize that you have a choice about how you think about literally everything in the world. And if it is a choice, I know what I'd personally choose to think. I'll believe in the thing that helps me the most, makes me feel the best, or gives me the greatest chance of success. My question is, what will you choose to believe the next time you need to reason towards a conclusion?